Fantagraphics has a new collection of Wallace Wood science fiction stories coming out this week, which means it's a great week to be a comic book fan. So previously, in their EC Artist Library collections, they come out with Spawn of Mars, Came the Dawn, and Atom Bomb and other stories, as far as collecting Wallace Wood EC work in these great collections. But this week, we're adding a fourth, and that is The Spawn of Venus. This collects all of the later science fiction stories that Wallace Wood had for EC Comics. It's an amazing collection. I'm going to flip the camera around, put this under the microscope. You're going to want to take a look at this because this is some of the best science fiction comic book art you will ever lay your eyes on. Stay tuned and watch this video until the end. And we're back. My name is Taylor. This is Taylor Talks Comics. Thank you for joining me. And special thanks to Tucker Stone and Fantagraphics for sending me out a review copy of The Spawn of Venus. Real quickly, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and comment down below with your thoughts on Wallace Wood or science fiction comic books, who your favorite science fiction comic book artist is. I'd love to talk to you guys down in the comments. And I also want to plug that this October, starting in just a couple days, I'm going to do 31 days of horror comics. So 31 videos and 31 days related to horror comics and horror comics related topics, which if you're an EC fan, you're going to want to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of those videos. But yes, as I said in the preamble, this is the fourth collection of Wallace Wood stuff that we've had so far from Fantagraphics in their EC Comics line. And I have a lot of videos on my channel showing off this line of books. It's one of my prides of my collections to have every volume of this collection so far. They all have great spines. They're designed by Jacob Covey. He's done a great job with them. Today's video is just about The Spawn of Venus and other stories. This is a new collection that's out this week. I often get asked too, whenever I do a video on these books, where's a good place to start with EC Comics and which volume should they start with and that kind of thing. If you're looking for science fiction, start with either Spawn of Mars or Spawn of Venus, because Wallace Wood truly was, in my opinion, the best science fiction comic book artist of all time, and these collect his science fiction stories. So either one of these volumes is a good place to start if you're wanting to get the science fiction side of EC Comics. So we're going to open this book up real quickly. Here's a great opening page here. You can just see the science fiction art right away on the screen. This volume was designed by Justin Allen Spencer, but Jacob Covey did the series design. So Justin Allen Spencer is just following, make sure your design matches for the spine and the back covers and everything like that. We do have stories in here written by Otto Binder, Ray Bradbury, Al Feldstein, Jack Olick, and I think William Gaines is in here too. They don't credit him on the written by on that page there, but illustrated by Wallace Wood. Here's another great thing too, if you're an EC head or want to know where these stories first appeared. All these books always have this on the inside. They tell you every issue, every single story that's included in this book, what issue they appeared in originally. So this one collects Weird Science of 1952 all the way to Incredible Science Fiction in 1956. So about 4 years worth with some extra stories there of science fiction stories. And this falls directly after Spawn of Mars. That one has some 1952 stories in there as well, but it kind of concludes there and then bleeds into this one. And they're not exactly like, this isn't in a volume 1 and that's a volume 2. All of these are one and done stories within them, so you don't need one without the other. It just, if you're wanting to read them in chronological order, that's the way to do it. Now here is the great table of contents that they always put together. I love the design here too, of having the artwork breaking off both pages of this table of contents. But they all have, best to their ability, I'll say down here too. They'll have the story by, script, and art. All of the stories in here have art by Wallace Wood, and they're all written by mostly Feldstein and Gaines, but some Ray Bradbury adaptations from his short stories that he wrote in prose. And then I think there's one or two Otto Binders. I think just one Otto Binder and 2 Jack Olicks. Now here's a great introduction by Tommy Burns and John Gothold. Shout out Tommy Burns. He's runs the EC Fan Addict page on Facebook. One of my favorite groups to be a part of. If you want to know more about EC Comics, or you do love EC Comics, join that Facebook group. It's incredible work. And Tommy Burns writes a lot of the introductions for these collections, and he does an amazing job. Here's a great picture of Wallace Wood reading some of the EC Comics. with the headline, "We at EC are proudest of our science fiction magazines." And it'll tell you right here. That's the headline that was in a lot of their advertisements that looked a lot like this. "We at EC are proudest of our science fiction magazines." And that's because the science fiction ones were the worst selling of the four genres that EC worked in. They have crime comics, war comics, horror comics, and then science fiction. And when I say worst selling, it doesn't mean they're bad selling. Like, they still did great as compared to comics from other publishers. But as far as the catalog of what EC was coming out with, it was the not the worst selling. I hate saying the worst selling because they were still great selling. But Bill Gaines is on record saying these were his favorite of all the books they came out with. So we have lots of great information about Wallace Wood, like behind the scenes stuff, but also they break down each and every single story that's within this collection, giving you some behind the scenes knowledge about what was going on, or just some anecdotes that will add to the story that you might not know otherwise. With some great Wallace Wood artwork. Here's a story, which I'll get to in a minute, where they draw the entire bullpen of EC Comics, all the artists and letters and everything. So really lengthy introduction, and there's such a great read, especially if you want to know more about comic book history, or especially EC history. I love this picture of Wallace Wood with the shirt that says, "Damn, I'm good." He's wearing like a cowboy hat with a cigarette. Here's an introduction by Grant Geisman. Grant Geisman is another great EC historian. He wrote the book, The History of EC Comics, that Taschen put out. So he's also very knowledgeable with EC Comics. So he writes the introduction here. And then here's something I've never seen. I don't own any EC Artist Edition, unfortunately. But I've never seen like a rough pencil kind of layout of Wally Wood's. So this is amazing to see. And then you get the finished product here, fully inked and everything with the zipatones and stuff. And then we get into the stories. So the stories, there's no covers in here. They had I think only one collection that collected covers of these, and they were in color, and that's the first one, The Corpse of the Engine. Otherwise, they've never collected covers throughout here, which is another reason why I own and love that History of EC by Taschen, because that includes all the covers. But even though, like, there's no, like, chapter breaks within stories, but each story starts off with really great title lettering, and typically a splash page of sorts, so you know when you're getting to a new story. Another great design piece, though, is they have page numbers down here for the whole collection. Each story maintains their page number down here, but at the top, it'll tell you which story you're reading as well. Like, this one is A Weighty Decision, and then we get to the next story, He Walked Among Us, and also He Walked Among Us at the top. So no confusion about which story you're reading when. Now, to talk about some of my favorite stories throughout here, there's so many. But seriously, this first one, though, has stuck with me the longest, I think, after reading this collection. And it has to do with the first trip to the moon. This is in early 1950s. So this is 16, 17 years before we actually landed on the moon as Americans. So that's one of my favorite things about science fiction from this era, too, is just predicting technology, predicting where we're going to be in the future as far as these things go. And space travel is one of them. And that's a large theme throughout all of these. But this one talks about, like, the projection, or having to project yourself into space via rocket ship, and how all the calculations would be exactly the same, down to the weight of all the astronauts. They even talk about one astronaut has to lose 10 pounds before the trip to even make it exactly right. Now, this guy's in love with this woman who is the daughter of the general that's running the mission for the Air Force. And she's afraid he's not going to come back from the mission. So she hides herself inside a compartment on the rocket, and then they don't find out she's in there until they're up in space. And then because she's there, that's going to throw off the entire weight of their mission, and they don't think they're going to make it back in time unless one of them leaves the ship. And I'm not going to spoil the ending for you, but the conclusion is just amazing. This next story, He Walks Among Us, has a lot of religious themes, but it doesn't beat you over the head with the themes at all. It has to do with this astronaut going to a whole other planet to inhabit it, study it for 4 years, all its animals and humans, or not humans, sorry, animals and whoever's living there, and vegetation and things. Now, when he gets there, he starts immediately helping some of the citizens with medicine and with food and things. And he realizes this caste system between the really very rich and the very poor, and that's it. There's no middle class. It's just the rich and the poor. And because he's helping the poor, the guy that's running the show here, the high priest, yells at him and says, "Stop helping the poor. We don't do that." But by the end of it, he becomes this like kind of this Messiah or this Jesus figure, and you'll find out far into the future they worship this one American astronaut that flew to this planet and helped out the poor and things. And it's got this like nice little tie to like the actual biblical religious themes, which is really nice. But it's not disrespectful to the Bible at all, if that's a concern of yours. It's just this kind of like interesting way to give you perspective on things. Let me see. Home to Stay is a Bradbury story adaptation, and I think this might be because it doesn't credit him on the front page. Yeah, I think this might be the story. I should have went back and looked. But there's a famous story where Ray Bradbury was a science fiction author. He wrote a lot of short stories. And the guys at EC were big fans of him. And they kind of stole his story a little bit to tell. And I think it's this one. Let me know in the comments if I got that wrong, but I think it's Home to Stay. And the way that Ray Bradbury handled that was that he just sent a letter to EC Comics office saying, "Hey, you forgot to send me a check for $50 for using my story." And then, so like he was very nice about it because Ray Bradbury is a comics fan. So William Gaines did the proper thing and sent him the $50 check, and then also built this relationship with him where they could adapt his other stories with giving him credit. I think there's 3 or 4 in here that are adapted stories of Ray Bradbury. Okay, so just to show you then, when they got permission from him and were actually paying him and things, here they'll say like adapted from a story by Ray Bradbury. So Ray Bradbury is one of the all-time famous science fiction authors, so it was a huge major coup for EC to be able to adapt his stories in a different medium. Here's another story I loved, Down to Earth. This one, again, blew me away, but then there's a follow-up, not a follow-up story, but a story that references it, which I'm going to get into. So this story is how there's all these airplanes that keep crashing all over America, and they can't figure out why. Like, there's a total mystery. Nobody can figure out why this airplane's crashing. And one of the most devastating crashes, again, this is eerie for anyone who's lived through like 9/11 or anything, but this plane crashes on New Year's Eve in Times Square. And you can even see in the 50s, Times Square New Year's Eve wasn't as big of a deal as it is today in 2025. So imagining an airplane crashing throughout that crowd is like devastatingly like awful to think about. So then, before I get to that, where the follow-up, just keep that in mind, that exact panel. I'll flip back and forth. But so they're trying to figure out what's happening, and then the result is they realize UFOs are causing it. But before that, all these people from like the Air Force and pilots and everything are refusing to fly, so no one's flying in America anymore, until they figure out that it was UFOs and this alien invasion. And then the scientist that figures that out encounters the aliens. I don't want to spoil for you what happens, but that's an amazing story as well. So back to that panel though, where he's flying to Times Square. I'm going to flip forward to one of my other favorite stories, EC Confidentials, with this came in, and you see the other angle here of the airplane. So you see the plane coming out from this angle in the original story. In the story, the opening splash page is the airplane coming at you with all these people screaming and like freaking out because this plane's crashing into them. Just eerie stuff that I can't, again, sticks with me. These stories, I feel like, are so good that they stick with you far after. A lot of times, these are all like 8-page strips within EC Comics. All their titles were 8-page, like their single issues would have 3 to 4, I can't remember, 3 to 4 8-page strips in them, and that'd be the whole comic book issue. And so these collections are all 8-page strips throughout here, all one and done stories. And I promise you, some of these 8-page strips, I can just read one of them and be totally satisfied getting a whole complete story and not need to read anything else the rest of the day because that's all I'm going to think about. These stories are that good. Sometimes I have trouble reading more than 2 or 3 because they're so good and satisfying that I just want to put the book down and just think about it for a while. But I digress. EC Confidential is the editor here, Phineas Fables, who's president of Fables Publishing, which is a reference to William Gaines' father had a publishing company called Fables. So it's like an inside joke, kind of. And Miss Cast is an actual staff member of the EC. Anyways, they bring in Feldstein and Gaines, and the publishers trying to figure out why every time they write a story in science fiction, it comes true. And he's presenting them every issue, so it's calling back all these previous issues of EC Comics. Something that totally never happened in EC stories was referencing back to old stories like that. And they even have the covers here, so it's like it was fun, like meta story. And Gaines and Feldstein are trying to explain to him like, oh, that's just a coincidence, like that didn't happen. And they would go on until they get to the down to earth story, which is he's looking at right here, and he's trying to get them to explain how that happened, how they predicted that happening. But then in the opening splash pages, it actually happening in the real world. And then there's an alien invasion and a cool little plot twist I don't want to spoil for you. My World is another great famous story from Wallace Wood, and this will be the last I explain as far as the stories go before we get to the back matter. But this is a story of like showing off everything that Wallace Wood likes to do for science fiction. Written by Feldstein still, but it's still like a story about Wallace Wood because it ends with this very famous last panel of Wallace Wood at his drawing table talking about, "For my world is the world of science fiction, conceived in my mind and placed upon paper with pencil and ink and brush and sweat and a great deal of love for my world. For I am a science fiction artist. My name is Wood." And it has his famous signature there, which I think Wally Wood's signature was the first to have like this kind of character to it, of all the EC bullpen artists and things. But that would become a characteristic and a signature of all of them. They'd all have kind of their famous cool signatures that all look different and distinct. Now let's get to the back matter because there's quite a bit in this. All right, so this one is When Magic Was Made, written by Howard Chaykin, which is amazing. So Howard Chaykin, comic book historian, but also great comic book artist and writer in his own right. He writes a little afterward here. This one's written by Larry Hama, again, awesome comic book artist / writer, mostly known for his writing, but he did comic book art. And there's even a great panel here where in the series canon that Wood did, which Fantagraphics did do a collection of that, there was a character called the Big Hama, and he was modeled after Larry Hama, which if you've ever seen Larry Hama, that's totally his face. But I guess the joke here is that at the time Larry Hama had like long hair, so Wallace Wood drew him bald, I guess. I don't know. That was a funny joke there, but it's very endearing, and Larry Hama writes it in here. And one thing that Wallace Wood was famous for was the 22 panels that always work, which is like 22 different looking comic book panels, whether it be like a long shot, a short shot, two characters close up, 22 different styles of panels that Wallace would use anytime he was stuck on a story that he felt like the writing was kind of weak. I think Larry Hama's credited with the person that kind of passed it around like the Marvel offices, and this 22 panels that always work kind of grew legendary because of that. I think that's the case, but again, I could be wrong. Because he was an assistant of Wallace Wood, and I think all of his assistants got a hold of that. Now here's S.C. Ringenberg with a great story, kind of a biography piece about Wallace Wood. And then here's a great one. So here's My Little World. So it's like the My World story, but it's depicting Wallace Wood's office with his drawing table and everything around it, but in a miniature form. And this was done by Norm Watson, which is an amazing piece. Like, I love that this exists. Like, this should be in a museum. It looks amazing. I'd love to see, like, a video of this or, like, a little tour with all the little details and things all around the background, because this is just an amazing piece. But this is a cool little addition to this collection. Now here's biographies of all the creators in here and all the writers in here, and then Ted White writing down the ups and downs of EC Comics. And then I think that's it. Other EC Artist Library, you know, all of them in here included. Which I did do a video, like I said, of all of these collections. I'm going to update that video whenever the next one comes out. The next one that's going to come out is collecting a lot of Panic strips, which is the Mad Magazine kind of spin-off title. The artists on that collection, I think, are Wallace Wood, and I know Jack Davis is on it, but I think Wallace Wood's the other one, because it's two different artists. Whenever that collection comes out, by the end of this year, I'll do a full updated video showing off all these collections. But that's it. I cannot recommend this collection enough, especially if you're into science fiction comics. I absolutely love Wallace Wood when he's drawing science fiction, and you'll see why when you read this. But he's also great at drawing crime and horror comics and war comics, but you can't go wrong with Wallace Wood, one of the truly great, all-time great comic book artists. But thank you guys so much for watching. Again, I'm going to be doing 31 days of Halloween horror comics, 31 days of horror comics all throughout October, so you want to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Give the video a thumbs up, And comment down below with your thoughts. I want to hear from you and talk to you guys. I do go live every Wednesday at noon Eastern as well. Do live show and to talk to you as well, live in the chat if you want to join us there. And everybody, just keep talking comics.